There are two arguments against sex work that often get positioned as feminist, but they are anything but feminist. The first says sex work can never be consensual, that everyone doing it must be trafficked or forced. The second says sex work can only be inherently abusive or misogynistic. Both might sound protective, but they end up harming people who practice sex work. Let's start with argument number one, trafficking. For the longest time, people believed most sex workers were trafficked, which is not true. In fact, in earlier research, most of the data collected on trafficking were based on police raids. If a raid happened, all the rescued sex workers were automatically assumed to be trafficked, which is why a lot of old data is really convoluted. This changed when sex workers themselves started organizing and joined the conversation. In fact, the society is really uncomfortable to know that there is a section of women and trans people and queer people who are really choosing to do this with their life and their bodies. I'm using the word choice very carefully here because here it means choosing the only viable option for you within the umbrella of complex social and economic realities. When you mix up trafficking and adult consensual sex work, you push the work underground, make it unsafe. And sex work still exists, but as long as it's invisible to you, you are comfortable. In India, sex work itself isn't illegal, but the things around it are, like renting a house, soliciting, or even living off your earnings. So sex workers are always at risk of being arrested, raided, or rescued against their will. This gives way to more police brutality, all in the name of saving women. The irony is that most people picked up in these raids go right back to sex work because that's how they survive. And these rescue centers, they become another story of violence for these women. Sex workers have been organizing for their rights for years now, and their demand is to decriminalize sex work. They don't need your pity or judgments. They need their rights. They need it to be safe for them to do their work, have labor rights, policies and laws in place so that they can be protected in their workplace. Second argument is that sex work can only ever be exploitative or misogynistic. Now that again sounds like a paternalistic bullshit to me. People do sex work for complex intersecting social and economic reasons. Some do it to pay their bills and take care of their family, and some because they have been shut out of other jobs, especially queer and trans people, and whose fault is that? This argument also implies that sex is something that can only be taken from women and men are the default beneficiaries of sex. Both of these arguments are coming from a place of moral panic. In fact, sex work really represents a total systemic collapse for a society, and it functions as a mirror. And honestly, the society cannot look itself in the eye and projects that very shame towards sex workers.